Well, hey there, guys. How's it going? It's Simeon here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Well, I am in this little town of Corona, New Mexico. This is the famous site where the rancher Mack Brazel came in from his ranch in early July 1947 with debris that he had found at the ranch over the course of a day or so, and came in with the famous mystery metals. If you'll remember the metals, the foil that would always come back to its shape and so forth, and the famous I-beams with the drawings on them, the hieroglyphics, we're told. I've heard a lot of lectures about Roswell over the years, especially from Stanton Friedman, who was at so many conferences that I started going to in 1996 was the first time I started going to these conferences. And right there, which is now a laundromat, was the bar where Mack Brazel went in with all of the strange debris that he had found at the ranch. I was talking to the person that runs the Corona Museum right back there. She said it was called The Road to Ruin. That was the name of the bar. It's now a laundromat. And this is sort of where it all happened, where we're told the military came in and confiscated all of the materials, all the metals, threatened people, even later threatened kids, little kids, and so forth. You can read about this in Don Schmitt's book and many other books, Stanton Friedman's book, Crash at Corona, and other books about Roswell, the real Area 51, and so forth, that have been written over the years. And, you know, it's many years later, we're even talking to Sarah here at the Historical Museum. She said there are still people who were kids then that still talk about it now, who are, you know, much older. So it's just interesting. This is the site of where the events began in terms of the people talking about it, debris and so forth. Then we had, obviously, Jesse Marcel coming back in the middle of the night to the house, the intelligence officer at Roswell Army Air Field, Roswell, about 70, maybe about 100 miles from here, bringing the debris back to Jesse Marcel Jr., who we heard talk about this at the Citizen hearing in 2013. So this is all part of the big mystery. What actually came down that night? It's a really good question, but I'm convinced, having heard the witnesses talk about it and hearing Stanton Friedman talk about it and Don Schmitt and others, you know, what they said was, at first I thought it was Russian and then I knew it wasn't. So what does that leave as a possibility? I believe that was the quote from Brigadier General DuBose. We don't have a lot of witnesses now, days who are still alive from that time period, and will we ever find out the truth? Well, I hope their records exist somewhere, maybe debris, maybe evidence, and we will. But anyway, thanks for watching. See you in the next
Hey guys,
video.
how you doing?
It's Simeon here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thanks for being here today. Well, we are in Roswell, New Mexico. This is where the Roswell crash is associated with, from 1947. But as I pointed out to you in the previous video, the crash actually happened near Corona, New Mexico, about 75 miles to the north of here. And there may have been another crash on the plains of San Agustin, about 100 miles to the west. So we're right outside the Roswell UFO Museum, now known as the International UFO Museum. Maybe at some point they'll change it to the International UAP Museum to keep up with the times. But this is a really fabulous museum. It really conveys the amount of intimidation that the military exerted on the people in this town. From Mack Brazel, the rancher that discovered the wreckage on the Foster Ranch where he was working, near Corona, New Mexico, and all of the other people that were involved, the Proctors, who were Brazel's neighbors, who he took pieces of the wreckage over to, Sheriff Wilcox, and the mayor, and just about everyone who was here, including the people that worked at WGCL, the radio station that was all set to broadcast an statement from Mack Brazel about finding this wreckage when they received a call from Washington, D.C. telling them that the FCC would probably revoke their radio license if they broadcast Brazel's interview, which they had recorded in audio at the time. So this is a really fabulous museum, and I didn't get to see the whole thing. There are a lot of other UFO incidents that are covered here, including Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, and the Zamora case from 1964, which also happened in New Mexico. I'm reminded of the incident that I experienced in Boulder that I wrote about in my book, Black Swan Ghosts, where I met a woman in a coffee shop who proceeded to tell me how her dad was one of the pilots that flew wreckage from this area. This was the home of the 509th Bomb Group in 1947. This was the only nuclear qualified military group in the United States military who were qualified to deal with nuclear weapons at the time. And she had said that her dad had flown one of the planes to Fort Worth and then Wright-Patterson, and it was one of the C-54s, and we still haven't identified who this pilot was. But talking to Don Schmitt, who was seminal in creating this museum, and who's written many books about the Roswell incident, he had mentioned that he had encountered her too in the museum once, and she seemed very credible. She described a lot of detail that only one of the pilots would have known about the interior of the plane, the crates that were used at the time, and the guards that, if you remember the main point of, I called her Jan in the book, what she had said, the main point was that there were guards in the plane guarding the contents from her father, the pilot. The guards were guarding the contents of these crates from the pilot. And she said they never left the crates except very briefly to use the bathroom, and they were armed. So that had to be pretty important contents to be guarding the contents of the crates, which goes into a lot of detail in this museum of what was, other witnesses, other pilots. Some of them said that they before the contents were loaded onto the C-54s and one B-29, where they were in the so-called bomb pit, which was lined with guards facing outward. One of the pilots said that they did move the tarp back and saw these alleged alien bodies, these very short beings, 3 to 4 feet tall and so forth. And this witness really reinforced that for me, talking to her. One of the main things that I never can forget is she said her dad didn't just come out and tell her this. It was on his deathbed in a hospital 2 weeks before he died. He called each of his daughters into the hospital room and told them the same story, that he had been afraid to talk about this because of threats from the military and so forth. And that really, again, comes through in the museum behind me here, where so many of the witnesses here were told, their family would be, basically terminated if they mentioned anything about what they had seen, the debris that Mack Brazel showed his neighbors and other people saw. Basically, the military silenced the whole thing. And, over a weather balloon or even a mogul balloon project, it's not credible. It doesn't make sense. There were many launches of those mogul balloons, I think 7 or 8, and no one was ever threatened when they saw the wreckage of any of other mogul balloon launches. You know, these were the listening platforms that were monitoring Soviet nuclear tests back at the time. And so again, I would recommend, if you're ever in New Mexico, to come see this museum. And I learned that past the 509th Bomb Group, it became the 579th Bomb Group, which was responsible for Walker Air Force Base and the Atlas F missiles that were here, that were precursors to the Minutemen missiles that took over later on. The Atlas missiles were liquid fueled, and as you can imagine, they had several accidents with, you know, highly explosive liquid fuel that had to be fueled into the rockets before they were launched and so forth. So there's a lot of history in this museum. And what happened at Corona and Roswell, will we get to solve this mystery? I think we will at some point, but there's a lot of evidence to see here, a lot of good affidavits from the witnesses talking about what they had seen and how they had been threatened by the military. So I think it's well worth your visit here sometime. It's a lot of fun. And feel free to put your comments in the box below. I look forward to seeing them. See you in the next video. Take care for now, and bye-bye.